book that examines the culture of masculinity to add to your reading list is Patriarchy Blues by Frederick Joseph. From the author of the instant New York Times bestseller, The Black Friend, comes Patriarchy Blues, a thought-provoking collection of essays, poems, and short reflections that explores issues of masculinity and patriarchy from both a personal and cultural standpoint. From fatherhood and manning up to abuse and therapy, Frederick Joseph fearlessly and thoughtfully tackles the complex realities of men's lives today. Patriarchy Blues forces us to consider the joys, pains, and destructive nature of manhood and the stereotypes it brings about. Patriarchy Blues is being published by Harper Perennial, and it's a thought-provoking collection you should add to your reading list. Welcome to The Reader's Couch, a podcast that brings you lively conversations with some of your favourite authors and bookish personalities. Over here, the couch is always booked, but I've moved some books to the side table and fluffed some cushions so I can welcome a guest or two to come lounge with us. Today on the couch, we have Amanda Bestor-Siegal, and she's here to talk to me about her debut novel, The Caretakers, a novel set in a wealthy Parisian suburb and centered around a group of au pairs, one of whom is arrested after the mysterious death of a French child. Stay tuned. A historical fiction novel to add to your reading list that's set at the height of the civil rights movement in the 1960s is In the Face of the Sun by Denny S. Bryce. In the Face of the Sun is a dual timeline novel. It takes readers on an audacious road trip with a pregnant young woman and her brash aunt from Chicago to Los Angeles to confront a decades-old mystery from 1920s Black Hollywood. In the Face of the Sun by Denny S. Bryce is being published by Kensington Books, and it's a historical novel you really don't want to miss. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me is Amanda Bestor-Siegal, and she's here to talk to me about her debut novel, The Caretakers. Please welcome to the couch, Amanda. Hey, Amanda.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yay, I'm super excited to have you on the show. Can't wait to talk about The Caretakers, but I want to gauge your excitement. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling?
Oh my God, so excited. I actually haven't seen the physical book yet. I know it's out in the world and mine are coming, but I think just seeing the book as a physical object in a bookstore, I'm probably going to just die on the floor in the bookstore. I'm really, really excited to actually see it finished.
Well, if you're like me, you'd be probably jumping around all silly and like, yay, that's my book. Hi, everyone, that's my book.
Yeah. I'm kidding. So long.
Oh my gosh, I'm kidding. But yeah, this is really exciting. I'm so happy you could carve out time to chat with me because I love this book. It was great. There were highs, there were lows, there was tension. I loved hearing from the au pairs, but I want readers to hear from you. Tell us about your novel, The Caretakers, and what can readers expect going in?
Yeah, so The Caretakers is about a community of au pairs in the suburbs of Paris. And the book opens with it's the death of a child who was reportedly alone at home while under the care of one of his au pairs. And so the book mostly takes place before that event, and it moves through points of view of different women in the community, about half au pairs and half French women in the town, so a teacher and a mother, the older sister of the child who passed away. And it kind of opens like a mystery, and there is a bit of, that through line of getting towards what led up to this event, but it's sort of ultimately more of a deep dive into the psychology of these women and what it means to be a caretaker and the ways that they are sort of all grappling with their identity and nationality and sort of feeling of belonging in this country at large, and how they ultimately kind of miss each other even though they're all trying to connect, and just the really, tragic consequences that ends up leading to.
Right, absolutely. When I first read the book, because I have a bad habit, I don't know if it's a bad habit or not, but I tend to not really dive too deep into summaries. I really don't, dive into who the author is. I tend to read it first and I'm like, oh my God, I'm super excited. I want to know who this person is. And I noticed that you lived in France for 4 years before moving back to the States. So the question is, what's your inspiration for the novel? But I kind of gathered, you kind of lived this life. So tell us a bit about your inspiration, but also what made you decide to put pen to paper and write this story?
Yeah, so I moved to France in my early 20s. I didn't have a timeline for how long I would be there. I had just lost my mom, and I was going through some really just needing to reset and kind of get away from myself. And au pairing was sort of my entryway into France, just logistically. It was the way I was able to afford to go. And so that first year when I worked as an au pair, I didn't write at all. I didn't set out to write a book about au pairs or anything like that. I didn't actually start writing the book until my second year in France. It was like a month before the end of the school year for the children. I just sat down at a cafe and started to write. And I think it stemmed originally from me kind of trying to figure out the reasons that I had come to France, like the true reasons, not the one that I was necessarily giving to people, but that sort of idealized version that I think a lot of Americans have of Paris. And it was something that I noticed a lot in other au pairs and my friends in the community. There was just this longing and this search that all these young women we weren't forced. We had a home to go back to if we wanted to, but we were choosing to be in this other place and all looking for something kind of intangible that I think Paris really ultimately can't, like no place can give someone. And that kind of search and that like doomed search in a way is something that kind of inspired the book. And it really started as just my own like exploration ground for my life in France, the things that I was curious about, the behaviors that I didn't understand. And it sort of just developed from there into this. I think I kind of grew up with the book because I was writing it all throughout my 20s. And so I think especially the older points of view, just the book kept expanding as I was growing, and my own questions about grief and identity were just developing. They really came through in the book in the different points of view.
Right. I mean, for me, the book, it was quite introspective. You know what I mean? It's like, first we have this boy, Julian, who's died in the care of his au pair who wasn't there, but he's passed away. So there's a mystery of trying to find out what happened to him. But I felt like I got to know all the other women that were kind of sharing their stories. The story, though, centers around Alina. Mm-hmm. She was the one who was charged with the murder. If you could just give us a brief summary of who Alina is, what is going on in her life and what she was going through prior to the death of Julian.
So the book sort of moves through these points of view one by one. So it isn't so much, we aren't going back and forth between people. We're kind of spending extended amounts of time with each individual woman. And Alina's the last point of view that we hear from. And so for most of the book, I think she's kind of this mysterious figure. Like everybody in the town sort of comes into contact with her in different ways, but it's very hard to get close to her. And I think she's someone who has a lot of walls up. And until we really get into her point of view, we've only really had glimpses of what's going on with her. And so I don't want to spoil too much.
Yeah.
Something we kind of know from the beginning is that unlike the other au pairs in the book, she worked for another family before the one that she ends up in. And she ended up having to leave pretty suddenly. And so she's also an older au pair, which is something I wanted to explore as an older au pair myself, that, a lot of the au pairs are 19 or 22. They're kind of on a gap year after high school or college or whatever. And she came when she was a little bit older. And so, yeah, I think she's got a lot of a kind of baggage that she's bringing with her from the US, and that's definitely informing her relationship to this family and to the other au pairs as well. She's quite aloof in a way that nobody else is.
Yeah, definitely full of contradictions for me, a bit flawed, and there's a lot of disappointment there. But yeah, Alina is definitely someone at the end. Well, I enjoyed reading the point of view of the French teacher, Geraldine.
Mhm.
Her point of view is also quite interesting. Throughout the story, you can see her grappling with her identity and her place in French society. You know, she's often seen as a foreigner
Mhm.
because of the color of her skin. Tell us a bit more about Geraldine.
So, yeah, Geraldine was one of the first characters I wrote, and she really came from, I was thinking a lot about, obviously, the au pairs are literally foreigners in this place. They're not French. Some of them really don't even speak French. But I also wanted to explore different ways that people can feel like foreigners in their own, in a place where they really aren't. And so for the French characters, I think they all sort of have different ways in which they're a little bit on the outside of something, that their community or the place that they're currently existing. And so for the main family that we get to know, it's about class. For Geraldine, it's about race. And for me, what I was thinking about a lot when I lived there is, for me, I am a foreigner, but as a white person, I could pass as French. And that was a really strange thing to experience, particularly around the terrorist attacks. And in 2015, there was just, I think, a lot of question about, I think this is all kind of questions that have endured in French society. But I think when I was living there, it sort of came to a head of just, who is French? There was a lot of kind of fear of foreigners for a while. And it was a strange experience for me to realize that in some ways I was actually experiencing less racism, less of that kind of like instinctive xenophobia, because as long as I kept my mouth shut, no one knew that I was foreign. And that was very different for some of my friends who are French, born and raised, but are women of color. And that became really important to me, to have that perspective in the book of something that I think we don't really have that in the States. I mean, we have a lot to reckon with regarding race, but this particular idea that you come from this culture where there's a certain expectation of what that looks like, and that there's an assumption just based on looking at somebody, whether they actually belong there or not, or whether they were born there or not, and having to explain that again and again and again. I think that that's just something that is really, really prevalent in France in particular, and felt like just a really integral part of the book. And beyond that, I think Geraldine also just thinking about different kinds of caretakers. Geraldine is a teacher. She has a very certain kind of relationship to caretaking that's very different than what au pairs have, or even, the mother of the child who passes away has. And I really wanted to explore that kind of more complicated form of getting really attached to people that you take care of, but ultimately you're not their mom. You're sort of always dealing with this distance between you and other people, between the people you're taking care of. And that was really the seed for her.
Right, awesome. And then there's Charlotte, who's the dead child's mom, whose point of view for me was very interesting, because there was like this wealth class gap, because she seems very self-conscious of her upbringing. Her upbringing wasn't like an upper class pedigreed upbringing. So she seems very self-conscious, and she's very keen on hiding it, which I found very interesting. So tell us a bit about Charlotte, and then her daughter, Natalie, who is also feeling like an outsider because she's a child from a previous marriage, and her mom is in this new second marriage. So I found that mother-daughter point of view quite interesting from both Charlotte and Natalie. So tell us about them.
Yeah. So just in the au pair community, I think, especially in Paris, there is this sort of class difference between the families that are able to afford au pairs. And I ended up working for many different families during my time there, whether as an au pair or just as a babysitter or English teacher. I kind of was exposed to a lot of different families from a lot of different socioeconomic backgrounds. And again, thinking about just all of the ways that a person can feel like an outsider, all of the places that this really intense need to belong to something can kind of stem from. I think Charlotte for me really came from wanting to explore, I think, as I am with all these women, how I think sometimes we think we want something that will sort of be the thing that will heal us or cure us or make us okay. And, for the au pairs, I think that's moving to France. But for Charlotte, I think it's really like living in this really like upper class society she's never been a part of. I think I was really interested in this idea of somebody who wanted this for so long, who wanted to live in Paris, who wanted to sort of rise above the sort of expectations that she grew up with for herself and her life. But then when she ultimately does have it, it's actually quite stifling, and she's really trapped, and she loses a lot of agency that I don't think she expected to lose. And so that was really where she came from. And then her relationship to her daughter, Natalie, I think in a way that was one of the most fun relationships for me to explore, in the sense that I think Natalie in some ways is this mini Charlotte. Like, I think they are actually very similar, but they both think that they are so different from one another. They have such a hard time connecting with one another. And I think it's really just about misunderstanding. And that's sort of a running theme of the book, is the ways that, people kind of miss each other. And I think Charlotte really is disappointed by the ways that Natalie doesn't sort of fit some mold of a daughter that she thinks she's supposed to have. And at the same time, I think Natalie really struggles with her mother's insistence that she like fit into this world, and that she just accept being part of this kind of new family with her, her stepfather and her half brother. And so the tension of that relationship and the kind of arc of that, I really, in some ways, think that's at the core of the book, is just how these two women who are struggling with very similar things in totally different generations ultimately can find each other and heal from that.
Absolutely. I mean, I know for maybe some readers, when you initially start out in this book, it's like, we want to find out, it's like a whodunit. Who killed this child? What happened to this child? Like you mentioned previously, Elena's mostly silent throughout the novel. And then, we kind of have this kind of dark, ominous coming out near the end. But ultimately, I kind of feel like the story is also one of love and family and belonging and finding oneself. And those are the themes I really connected to and love the most. Now, we spent some time discussing some of these characters, and I'm going to put you on the spot now. Who is your favorite in the story? Or if not your favorite person, maybe your favorite person to write, maybe, or explore and discover?
I feel like each one of them was my favorite while I was writing them. But I think I do have a soft spot for Lou, who partly was just one of the first characters I wrote. And also, I think Lou, to me, she's the first au pair we hear from. And she really represents, I think, more than anyone else, a child taking care of children, which I think is, in some ways, that was a really, really big thing I was thinking about when I started writing the book. Just au pairs are so young and we have so much responsibility, and it's such a strange line to walk of kind of wanting to be part of this family, but also ultimately being an employee. And so Lou is the character who I think kind of exemplifies that the most. And also she's just so self-sabotaging. She's so afraid of asking for help and being vulnerable. And I think all the characters are struggling with that to varying degrees. But with her, it's just because she's so young, I think it feels especially tragic. She's kind of the character that I most want to just take home with me and give a big hug to her.
Oh, yeah. Lou was early in the book for sure. And yeah, I liked reading about Lou too. For me, it was a tie between Lou and Geraldine because I loved her point of view as well. Okay, so we're going to break things up a bit with a little game. We're going to call it Au Pairing in Paris. How's that?
Great.
Okay, so because the novel centers around a group of au pairs and you have some experience being one as well, I'm going to ask you some situational questions and you're going to either give me your best answer or maybe your top three. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, let's do this. Okay, 1, what's the biggest misconception of being an au pair in Paris?
I think the biggest misconception is that the kids will be absolutely in love with you 100% of the time, and there will be just love and fun, and that you'll really be a member of the family, big sibling. I want to hedge and say that some of this is true, but I think that the conception is a bit extreme for what actually, it's a much more complicated experience than that. It's very varied. You're raising children, essentially. It's not like the photos that you'll find on the au pair websites.
Okay, that's fair, not like the photos. What's the biggest pro, though, of being an au pair in Paris?
Oh my God, you learn so much about yourself, about the country, about the language. I would never have had the life in France I had if it hadn't begun with au pairing. I think it's just being immersed in that environment in another family is, I don't know, honestly, how you move to another country without having some kind of version of that. It's just really incredible to be that deep in it.
Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to have fun as au pairs because some of the au pairs in the book had fun.
Yeah.
So, top three places to eat and have coffee, you'd say.
Oh my God. Well, so this isn't my actual favorite place to eat is the river. Just having a picnic on the banks of the Seine is truly the like my favorite thing to do in Paris. So really just going to any cheese shop and get in a bakery, get a baguette, get a bottle of wine and just sit on the cobblestones.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. It's, you can be there all night. It doesn't close. And then I think pretty much any cafe, but one of my favorite spots is the Place de la Contrescarpe in the Latin Quarter. It's this square that it's kind of tucked away behind the Pantheon, and it has just cafes all around it. I actually wrote most of the book there. It's just a very like quiet, scenic spot to be. And Cafe Boulogne, which is at the bottom of Rue Mouffetard, it's just some of the best food I've had in Paris. It's kind of wild because it looks exactly like every other cafe. Like you'd had no idea that it's just remarkable food. But yeah, red awning. It's also on a little square and it's just delicious.
Awesome. And where are au pairs going shopping?
Oh, well, on the au pair salary, a lot of us would go to Primark, which is like outside of France, or outside of Paris, rather. We'd have to go take a big bus. You can also, there are some really fun, they're called kilo shops in Paris, where it's kind of a thrift store, but you pay by the weight. And so you kind of just get whatever clothes you want and you put it on a scale. And there's a lot of really fun vintage shops like that, especially in the Marais. And then if you want kind of more, like new stuff for yourself, Galerie Lafayette is kind of the big department store. They just have like everything you could ever imagine, every brand. That's, just a great place to even just walk around. They have amazing Christmas decorations in December too.
Yeah, for sure. And where do au pairs relax and probably go a bit exploring?
Day trips are really fun and popular just because it's so easy to travel from Paris. And au pairs do kind of have the day off. Like you pick up your kids at 4, but yeah, I remember we would go to Provins, which is this little medieval village about an hour outside of Paris. You just take the train. It's super easy to get there. And then some of the suburbs too are really beautiful. Saint-Germain-en-Laye has a castle you can go hiking around. And that's just like a quick regional train. So yeah, kind of finding those like fun little day trips to get outside of the city. That is definitely a kind of exciting thing to do.
Right. Okay. And our last one is top 3 tips for au pair survival.
Yeah. So I would say speak French as much as you possibly can. This is assuming you're in France, obviously. I think, getting better at the language will change your life in terms of your relationships with your host family, but also France in general. Just really, really forcing yourself to speak French, even if your host family speaks English. It's such an amazing opportunity to learn. My second tip would be to make friends immediately, especially with other au pairs. I think, the book, you kind of see some of the dysfunction of some friendships, but in general, like having that community of people who do the thing you do is just so supportive and so important. And then travel, like treat yourself to trips. One of my favorite things about au pair year was just taking these little weekend trips to Amsterdam or Italy. It's so affordable once you're there. And it really it's the best thing, especially if you're coming from, the States or anywhere where travel is kind of a little more difficult. Like it's just a really big country. Being in the center of Europe, just taking advantage of that while you can is just the best thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for playing our game, Au Pairing in Paris. That was fun. And hopefully people got some tips. I don't know if you want to au pair in Paris.
Hopefully.
But getting into your writing life a bit real quick. I know you mentioned one of the cafes where you actually wrote most of the book, but how long did it take for you to kind of pull together the Caretakers? And, what was your publishing experience like?
Yeah, it took me about 6 years to write the book, and I took pretty big breaks. I'm not necessarily somebody who writes every day, so I would kind of do it in these splurges. But yeah, I spent most of it I wrote while I was in France, and then I finished it up in just the past 3 years. I've been living back in the States. mostly writing in coffee shops and cafes. I have a hard time working at home. And the publishing experience was really a whirlwind. Like, I just, after spending so long alone with a book, I felt really, really lucky, and just, I think I had a much quicker experience than I think a lot of people do in terms of finding an agent. I think I just it was one of those right person at the right time moments of querying my agent and then selling the book. I think the thing about publishing that I love so much that I wasn't expecting is how many people work on this book. It can be really, really lonely spending all these years making something, and you have no idea if anyone else would ever want to read it. It's kind of just like a labor of love. And to have, not just my editor, who was amazing, but also like a publicist and a cover designer and copy editor. Like, I remember getting my copy edit letter, and it was just so detailed. Like, she'd gone through every character in the entire book, like written down the first page they appeared, all the information we get about them, ages, like background, just to make sure things are consistent. And to just have people poring over something that I made by myself with that much attention and care has really just been the most gratifying thing. Like, it's amazing to feel like I have collaborators finally. It's just been really exciting to kind of go through this process and be surprised by every single thing because it's new. It's my first book. Maybe authors get jaded later on, I don't know. But right now, I just feel like in awe of truly every single thing. Like, everything is new.
Right. Absolutely. But if you could tell your younger self anything, Amanda, what would it be? Your younger writing self?
I would tell myself to be really patient and not worry about how long it's taking. I think, I don't know, self-doubt is such a big part of the process for me. I think for a lot of writers, there's just a lot of periods where it feels like this book is never going to get done and it's not good and all of this stuff that's not very fun. And I wish that I could tell myself that that is really part of the process. Like, those days are probably days where I should just give myself a break and not read too deeply into them, because it just takes a really long time. And I think persevering is kind of the hardest and also most important part. So yeah, I wish I could let my past self know to just chill out a bit and not worry so much if it feels like it's just taking a long time and it's hard. It's like, yeah, of course it's hard. Writing a book is hard.
Yeah, I think most of us would agree. We love reading them, but can't even fathom what it would take to write a book. So yeah, definitely, for sure. Okay, so before, I jump off your writing life real quick, I want to know, I'm getting nosy. Are you working on any other books? Are there any other projects? What can we look forward to? What can you tell us?
I'm working on my next book. I can't talk about it too much, which I know is so boring, but I'm still in the kind of very early stages of figuring out what it is. But yeah, it is a novel. I wish I could write short stories. I genuinely don't know how. I'm very bad at it. So yeah, working on a novel, I think it'll be, I don't know. I always say it'll be really different from this book. Like, I just want to do everything I didn't do in this first book. And the more I work on it, the more I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of similar. Maybe this is just who I am as a writer. But yeah, I'm kind of getting into that now. And it feels really good to be working on something new.
Awesome. All right, so getting into your reading life real quick. I know we're here to talk about your novel, The Caretakers, but I want to know what you're reading. I know my listeners want to know. So tell us about the last book that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
Well, I'm not done yet, so this feels like I'm cheating, but I'm currently reading More Than You'll Ever Know by Katie Gutierrez, which is coming out in June. And I'm just so obsessed with it. I cannot believe how good it is. And I'm just so, so, so excited for it to come out. But it's about this woman who has a secret family, like a secret marriage, and there's a murder and there's a kind of mystery, but it really, really is about these women and the expectations of family and kind of our obsession with true crime. And it kind of hits all those sweet spots of being a really fast-paced kind of can't put it down thriller, but also just so smart about kind of modern family life and being a mother. And it's just really brilliant. I know it's her first book, but yeah, it's coming out in June. I just can't wait for other people to read it.
Yay, awesome. And we love indie bookstores here on the show, and we ask all our guests. So of course, I'm going to ask you to share with our listeners some of your favorite indie bookstores.
Yeah, well, I live in Austin, Texas now. So my current spot is Book People, which I just love them. They're very big. The booksellers are super kind. They have really fun like gifts and stuff. And it's become kind of my sanctuary place. And then when I lived in New York many years ago, and Housing Works bookshop and cafe was, I feel like I basically lived there for 2 years. I was just there all day, every day. Like it was where I worked. It was where I like read. It was where I cried. It's an incredible place in Soho. And it's the thing I miss most about living in New York is just this bookstore.
Awesome. I bet. I mean, I would give anything to hang out at a bookstore all day.
It was a special time.
Absolutely. Okay, so kind of to wrap things up and kind of pull things together, I know you've done your job, you've written the book, you've given it to us, but what do you want readers to maybe feel after reading The Caretakers? What are some maybe reactions you're hoping for, or just some thoughts you're hoping readers might have?
I mean, the book is told from 6 different points of view, and they're all women, and I think they're all really flawed in a lot of ways. I think a lot of them are actually not easy to like. That's something that I'm just generally really interested in reading and writing about, is just flawed women, and especially when it comes to motherhood and caretaking. What does it mean to be a woman who doesn't feel good at that? Like, it doesn't feel like a natural like skill. And my hope is that readers come away not agreeing about the characters. Like, I think my dream conversation in a book club or something would be people just disagreeing on like which character they liked the most, or who they identified with, or who they thought was awful. Like, I think there's pros and cons of every woman in this book. And yeah, just women aren't monolithic. And I think like having people really feel drawn to different people and really repelled by others is something that I hope like would make that reading experience and discussion really, really lively.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited. I enjoyed the book. I can't wait to see which character readers gravitate to. But yeah, I'm super excited. And thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Thank you so much for tuning in to The Reader's Couch. You can find out more about the show and submit your questions for our guest by visiting our website, thereaderscouch.com. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Couch Is Booked. If you like the show, please subscribe, share, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Next week, I'll be back with new guests, more books, and some fun games we can play. But until then, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.